Sherlock Holmes retrieved his bottle from the corner of the mantelpiece and took his hypodermic syringe from its neatly arranged morocco case. With his long, white, nervous fingers, he adjusted the delicate needle and rolled back his left shirt cuff. For a while he gazed thoughtfully at his sinewy forearm and wrist, which were marked with countless puncture scars. Eventually he plunged the sharp point into his skin, pressed down on the tiny piston, and sank back into the velvet-lined armchair with a long sigh of satisfaction. I had witnessed this routine 3 times a day for many months, but familiarity had not dulled my discomfort. On the contrary, each day I grew more irritable at the sight of it, and my conscience burdened me nightly for lacking the courage to speak out. Despite my repeated vows to confront him about it, there was an air of cool indifference about my companion that made him the last person I wanted to challenge. His great abilities, masterful demeanor, and my experiences with his extraordinary talents made me hesitant to approach him too boldly. However, that afternoon, whether it was the bouillon I had consumed with my lunch or the irritation caused by his extreme deliberation, I suddenly felt unable to hold back any longer. He looked up languidly from the old black-letter book he had been perusing when I inquired about his choice for the day, asking if it was morphine or cocaine. He replied that he was using cocaine, specifically a 7% solution, and casually offered me the chance to try it. I brusquely declined, explaining that my constitution had not yet recovered from the Afghan campaign, and that I could not afford to exert any extra strain on it. He smiled at my fervor, acknowledging that I might be right, admitting that he found the effects of cocaine to be so stimulating and clarifying to the mind that he considered its secondary effects to be of little concern. I pressed on, cautioning him to count the cost. I pointed out that while his mind might be roused and excited, it was a pathological and morbid state that could lead to lasting weakness. I reminded him of the severe reaction he experienced afterward, arguing that the risk of losing his exceptional abilities for a fleeting pleasure hardly seemed worth it. I spoke not just as a friend, but as a medical professional responsible for his well-being. He appeared unoffended, instead resting his fingertips together and leaning on the arms of his chair, as if he enjoyed the discourse. He expressed that his mind rebelled against stagnation and craved problems and work. He relished mental challenges, stating he could forgo artificial stimulants when engaged in such tasks. He abhorred the dullness of everyday life and desired mental elevation, which he claimed was the reason he had chosen, or rather created, his unique profession. I raised an eyebrow, asking if he meant he was the only unofficial detective. He clarified that he was the only unofficial consulting detective, the ultimate authority in detection. When other detectives like Gregson, Lestrade, or Athelney Jones found themselves out of their depth, he examined the data as an expert and provided a specialist's opinion. He sought no credit and appeared in no newspapers. The work itself and the enjoyment of applying his unique talents were his greatest reward. He reminded me of my own experiences with his methods during the Jefferson Hope case. I wholeheartedly agreed, recalling how impressed I had been, even documenting it in a small brochure titled A Study in Scarleton. Holmes shook his head sadly, admitting he had glanced over it but could not congratulate me, stating that detection should be an exact science treated with cold objectivity. He criticized my attempt to romanticize it, likening it to mixing a love story with a mathematical proposition. I protested, insisting that romance was inherent in the case, and I could not alter the facts. He countered that some facts should be omitted or presented with a sense of proportion. He believed the only noteworthy aspect of the case was the analytical reasoning that led to its resolution. His critique of my work, which I had crafted to please him, annoyed me, and I felt irritation at the underlying vanity in his didactic manner. Despite this, I remained silent, nursing my wounded leg, which still ached from a Giselle bullet I had received some time ago. After a moment, Holmes mentioned that his practice had recently expanded to the Continente. He had been consulted by Fernand Wallevillard, who had recently gained prominence in the French detective service. Holmes noted that while Le Villard possessed keen intuition, he lacked the extensive knowledge needed for advanced detection. The case at hand involved a will, and had some intriguing features. Holmes had referred him to two similar cases, one in Riga in 1857 and another in St. Louis in 1871, which had helped Le Villard find the true solution. He then tossed me a crumpled sheet of foreign notepaper containing notes of admiration, with exclamations like magnifiques, coup de maîtres, and tours de force, all reflecting the Frenchman's ardent admiration. I remarked that he spoke to Holmes like a pupil to a master, to which Holmes modestly claimed that Le Villard overvalued his assistancy. He acknowledged that Le Villard had considerable talent, possessing two of the three essential qualities for an ideal detective, observation and deduction. He noted that Le Villard lacked knowledge, which would likely come with time, and informed me that Le Villard was currently translating some of Holmes's works into French. I expressed surprise, prompting Holmes to laugh, and confirmed that he had authored several monographs on technical subjects. He mentioned one titled Upon the Distinction Between the Ashes of the Various Tobaccos, in which he catalogued 140 types of tobacco, complete with colored plates illustrating the differences in ash. He explained its importance as a clue in criminal trials, suggesting that identifying the type of tobacco could significantly narrow down a search. I remarked on his extraordinary attention to detail. He explained that he valued their significance, referencing another monograph on tracing footsteps and the use of plaster of Paris for preserving impression. He also mentioned a curious work on how various trades influenced hand shapes, illustrating the hands of different tradespeople. He believed this knowledge was crucial for scientific detectives, especially in cases involving unidentified bodies or tracing criminals' backgrounds. I assured him that I found his interests fascinating, especially given my first-hand experience with his practical application of them. I then recalled his earlier comments about observation and deduction, questioning how the two were related. Holmes leaned back in his chair, sending up clouds of blue smoke from his pipe, and explained that while observation revealed facts, deduction allowed one to understand their implication. For example, he noted that he could see I had visited the Wigmore Street post office that morning, but it was deduction that revealed I had sent a telegram while there. I confirmed he was correct on both counts, admitting I was puzzled as to how he deduced it, as it had been an impulsive decision I had not mentioned to anyone. He chuckled, noting that the explanation was quite simple. Observation showed a reddish mold on my instep, which I had likely picked up from the earth that had been disturbed near the post office. The unique reddish tint of the earth was not found anywhere else in the area, making it easy to deduce its origin. I inquired how he had deduced my telegram, and he explained that he knew I had not written a letter since I had been sitting across from him all morning. He also noticed stamps and a bundle of postcards in my open desk, leading him to conclude that I had gone to the post office to send a telegram. He emphasized that eliminating other possibilities led to the truth. After pondering this, I acknowledged that it was indeed a straightforward deduction. I asked if he would find it impertinent if I challenged his theories with a more difficult test. He welcomed the challenge, stating that it would keep him from taking another dose of cocaine, and that he would be delighted to tackle any problem I presented. I mentioned that he had once said it was difficult for a person to use an object daily without leaving traces of their individuality, asking if he could provide an opinion on a watch I had recently acquired. I handed him the watch, feeling amused at the challenge I had set, thinking it impossible, and hoping to teach him a lesson about his occasionally dogmatic approach. He examined the watch closely, studying the dial, opening the back, and inspecting the works with both his naked eye and a powerful lens. I struggled to suppress a smile when he finally closed the case and returned it, looking somewhat disappointed. He noted that there was little data to work with, since the watch had been recently cleaned, robbing him of many suggestive clues. I confirmed he was correct, admitting it had indeed been cleaned before reaching me. Inwardly, I accused him of using this as a flimsy excuse for his lack of findings, questioning what evidence he could expect from a cleaned watch. Despite this setback, Holmes shared that his investigation had still yielded some results. He speculated that the watch belonged to my elder brother, who had inherited it from our father. I acknowledged that his deduction was likely based on the initials H. W. engraved on the back. He confirmed that the W suggested my name and explained that the watch dated back nearly 50 years, the initials being as old as the timepiece itself, indicating it was made for the previous generation. He reasoned that jewelry typically descended to the eldest son, who would likely share the same name as the father. He recalled that my father had passed away many years ago, concluding that the watch had thus been in my elder brother's possession. I affirmed his deductions were correct and pressed for more information. Holmes continued, stating that my brother had been a man of untidy habits, very careless. He had been left with good prospects, but squandered them, living in poverty with occasional brief periods of prosperity, ultimately succumbing to drink and dying. That was all he could deduce. I sprang from my chair, limping around the room in frustration, feeling a wave of bitterness. I accused him of being unworthy, expressing disbelief that he would resort to such tactics. I insisted that he could not have derived this knowledge merely from the watch, implying it was unkind and bordering on charlatanism. Holmes, kind in his response, apologized and acknowledged that viewing it as an abstract problem had made him forget how personal and painful it could be for me. He assured me that he had not known I had a brother until I handed him the watch. I pressed him on how he had acquired such accurate information, questioning the source of his insight. He explained that it was a matter of luck, clarifying that he could only assess the balance of probabilities and had not expected to be so precise. I pressed on, wanting to know if his observations had resulted from mere guesswork. He firmly stated that he never guessed, considering it a destructive habit to his logical faculty. He explained that what seemed strange to me was only so because I did not follow his line of reasoning or observe the small details that could lead to significant inferences. He pointed out the lower part of the watch case, noting its dents and scratches from being kept with hard objects, suggesting that a man who treated a 50-guinea watch so carelessly must indeed be a careless individual. He further inferred that a man inheriting such a valuable item was likely well off in other areas. I nodded in agreement, indicating that I understood his reasoning. He elaborated that pawnbrokers typically scratched the ticket number inside a watch case for convenience, and there were 4 such numbers visible on this watch. He inferred that my brother had often been in financial straits, with the implication that he had brief periods of prosperity, as he must have redeemed the pawned watch. Finally, he directed my attention to the inner plate, where scratches around the keyhole suggested a heavy hand in winding it, indicating the unsteady hand of a drunkard. I found his deductions quite clear and regretted my earlier judgment of him. I expressed my newfound faith in his remarkable abilities and inquired if he had any current professional cases to work on. He replied that he had none, and that was why he resorted to cocaine, stating he could not exist without mental challenges and questioned the value of possessing talents without an opportunity to use them. He described the dreariness of the world outside, dramatizing the yellow fog swirling down the street, and across the dreary houses, lamenting the commonplace nature of life and crime. Just as I was about to respond to this tirade, our landlady entered with a card on a brass salver. She informed Holmes that a young lady was there to see him, revealing the name Miss Mary Morstan. Holmes read the name, admitting he had no recollection of it, and instructed Mrs. Hudson to ask the young lady to come up, requesting that I remain with him.